Welcome back to Design Smith. In today's video, I want to start a new series called Dream Concert Poster Series. And this series of posters is going to be concerts that I never did get to see, but ones that I really wanted to see either during the prime of their time or a combination of bands and artists together at the same concert. So I don't want to do any type of festivals or anything like that, but if I could take this band and put this band together and make it into a dream concert, that's the idea of this concept. Before we get started, please consider subscribing to support the channel. So I don't really want to rank these, they're not going to go in a particular order, but the very first one definitely has to be Michael Jackson. And remember, this is a dream poster series, so really anything goes. If I had to choose a tour to see Michael Jackson on, it definitely would have been the Bad Tour. It's personally my favorite album, and up until that point, he would have already come out with Off the Wall and Thriller, and then of course all the songs from Bad. It would have been really cool to see Black or White live, but it's fine. I can take everything all the way up to and including Bad. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is set an area where we're actually going to have a picture of Michael. And I think maybe I'll do 3 inches down and 1.5 inches in. So let's get this all the way up to here and then do minus 1.5. And I'm going to drop the album cover in here just so we can get some inspiration going on. And I think I might actually pull all this down to maybe 13 inches or so. I'm not going to do the full square like 15 by 13. And I'm also going to drop this here just to get an idea of layout. I'm not going to copy the layout, but I'm going to do something that's kind of similar and just get some inspiration. Okay, so this font right here, I'm not sure exactly what the font is. I'm not going to go through the trouble of actually finding the exact same font. I'm just going to use Bebas. So here we go, there's that. And let's just kind of move this out of the way. What I want to do is to make sure that my type is set exactly where I want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and set my kerning to optical. And let's go ahead and pull this out right here. Since this is exactly the way that I want to keep it, I'm going to go ahead and create outlines. And that's going to allow me to move this exactly where I need it to be. It's going to make that bounding box exactly around the glyphs of the text. So let's set this to 1.5 inches and also 1.5 inches going down. Although, you know, one thing that we need to do is we need to do Frank DeLeo Presents. Hopefully I said his name right. And I'll use Futura for it since we're not using Helvetica. All right, so let's get this to probably maybe around 50 points or 40 points. That probably looks a little bit better. And let's go ahead and outline that. And we're gonna move it horizontally by 0 and push it down to 1.5 inches. And actually, I'm gonna bring it up by 1 inch because I think that 1/2 inch is perfectly fine. So let's do that. Do 1/2 inch down. You know what? I'm going to bring it up to 3/4 inch. Okay, that's better. All right, so now our width of this should be 15 inches. And let's set the spacing between these two at about 1/2 inch. That looks good to me. And we'll do the same thing here, 1/2 inch from that text in that image. So what we're going to do is I'm going to find a Michael Jackson Bad era photo to put in here, but we're going to do that when we go into Photoshop. And again, this is a dream concert, so I can just make whatever date I want. So I'll just make my birthday, and I'll select the TH on these, and we'll do like a little superscript thing, and then underline. And then we'll do the same thing here. We'll just copy and paste these into here. I like that. I'm gonna go ahead and get all the text that I want on here before I make any further changes. So I'm gonna say Nashville, Starwood, Amphitheater. That's where he probably would have performed during that time. I actually haven't looked up to see if he even came here during that tour, but that would have been really cool. Although I would have been 5 years old. All right, so let's do 1/2 inch here, and let's center this to the artboard, and we'll probably just kind of play around with the spacing a little bit. I want this to be a little bit tighter, so we'll do 1/4 inch, that looks good. And I'll just write something that's kind of a little bit generic, but you know, a little bit more specific to Nashville. And I'll keep it as Acumen right here. So I'm just gonna type out some stuff. And I was also able to find what the phone number of Starwood used to be, so we'll put that right here. And since it was a local one, and we'll go ahead and match the formatting of this poster, probably didn't have the area code. It could have had it, but we'll just take it off here. What the heck? All right, so as you can see, we've got a little bit more vertical space to play with here. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna bring these down here. I'm gonna group them together. Now I'm gonna select both of these. Click on this first one, and we'll set this at probably about 1/2 inch. That looks good. And then we'll bring this all the way down to here. This is kind of a little trick that you can do. 14.625, and then we'll just take a ½ inch off. So that gives us our space for our image here. And as you can see, our original inspiration is actually a little bit taller than this one is. This is a little bit wider, but I tend to stick with about 18 by 24 for my concert posters. And I also just realized that we used Acumen instead of Futura, so I need to make sure that everything matches there. And we'll bring this back up to 50 points, and we'll align this to the right, make sure that that is lined there, and this is aligned here. Excellent. All right, so now we have what is our basic template. We're gonna copy all of this from Illustrator directly into Photoshop, and I'll show you exactly how I'm gonna be doing this. First thing I wanna do is select everything and double click on my fill color. You'll notice that not everything is the same color. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring this up to about 10% black because we want effects in Photoshop to actually show up. If a color is 100% black, you won't see the effects. Okay, so the first thing I wanna do is select everything and hit copy. All right, so I'm here in Photoshop and I'm gonna go ahead and hit paste and make sure that I have Smart Object selected and hit OK. Pasting it as a smart object will allow us to edit it later if we need to. All right, so now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna select all of the text only, and we're gonna hit copy and paste as a smart object again. So that way these layers are separate from our image. So let's go ahead and name this layer text. And now we'll select the placeholder for the image. So we're gonna hit copy and paste into Photoshop. And that's why we pasted that original one in here, so that we can see exactly where it lines up so that everything is correct. We'll double click on this and just name it image. And now we can click on the original vector smart object and just hit delete. So now our image is separate from our text. All right, so the next thing I wanna do is find an image of Michael in his bad costume, preferably at an actual concert during a show. This right here is a pretty awesome picture, so we'll use this one. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to mask this image inside of this shape. And all we have to do is select both of them, make sure the image is on top. We're gonna hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows in between these two layers until you see this little arrow right here. And then all you have to do is click. And you'll notice that it looks like nothing's happened, but check this out. Now we can hit transform and we can expand and it won't go outside of those bounds. And what I want to do overall with this poster is I want the imagery to be black and white, and I want to do like a vintage paper texture overlay across the whole thing. So I'm going to desaturate, or you can go up here to image and adjustments and desaturate. And before I do anything with my layers, I want to go in here and add all the effects that I want to add. So I'm going to go in here to my resources folder and look for some vintage papers, just kind of see what we have here. I really like this one, so let's double click on this and bring it into Photoshop. And we'll just drag this on top of everything. I'd like to keep the effects of this a little bit more on the simple end for this poster specifically, because they wouldn't have added too many effects to this. All right, so this is on our top layer, and we're just gonna cycle through the blending modes here. So in order to do that, all you have to do is hold down Shift and hit the plus sign, and you can just kind of go through these and we'll see what works best for this. Typically overlay works really well for this, but soft light will actually tend to balance out those contrasts a little bit more. And also one thing that we need to do is add a background layer to make sure that this background that we're working with is not 100% white. Because just like you won't see the effects when it's 100% black, you also won't see them if they're 100% white. So let's bring them up to about maybe 93%, that looks good. And hard light is pretty cool. That's awesome. I really like that a lot. What I'm looking for is for the paper itself to cover the entire image and to give us a really nice, consistent effect all the way across the poster. Okay, I'm a big fan of subtract, although it's a little bit harsh. So what we can do is go in here to the paper layer, and we're gonna add a curves layer over this. And we're just gonna kind of bring this up right here, just to kind of brighten it up a little bit. And then we'll click on Michael, go over here to curves, and we'll adjust his curves. I really do like the nice stark contrast that we've got going on here. It's very dramatic. So I'm a fan of that. I really like that a lot. Okay, if you zoom in and just kind of take a look at everything, you'll notice that the text and the outer edges of the image right here, they're very, very clean. This is very crisp text that's sitting directly on top of this poster, and this is definitely not a look that we want. So there's a few things that we're gonna do here. So let's go to the top layer and let's create a new layer. And I'm just gonna type grain. And we're gonna hit Shift and Delete on our keyboard and bring up 50% gray for the fill, hit OK. And now we're gonna go to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. So what we need here is a pretty good amount of grain, pretty heavy, probably gonna do like around 85 or something like that. And for the size, we'll do probably around the same amount. And for the roughness, I'm gonna crank this all the way up to 100. And then for a vignette, let's just kind of do like a negative, like no more than a -20. That looks good. All right, so we've got this nice consistent grain effect that is being applied across the poster, although we need to change the blending mode of this. So again, we're just gonna kind of cycle through these. I'm thinking that overlay is probably gonna be our best bet. It typically is. All right, so that's gonna be step one into kind of helping age this poster a little bit more, but here's where the real magic comes in. So we wanna make this look like it was printed back in 1988 and not in 2024. So all we have to do is click on our image layer. This is the container that is actually holding the image. So go up here to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And we're gonna bring this up to about maybe like somewhere between a 5 and a 10. So you can see here that this is blurring it, but what it's really doing is it's making it look like it's kind of burning into the paper instead of just very cleanly sitting on top of the paper. It's making it look more like a finalized printing piece that we scanned rather than creating in the computer. 10 might be a little bit much, so I think I'm gonna do like a 7.5, just kind of split that difference there. All right, so the image is looking good, and now what we'll do is we'll go to the text layer, and we'll go up to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur again. Now 7.5 is gonna be too strong here because we have text at different sizes, and what you could do is separate those into their own layers. That way you can target them differently, but just for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna keep them all on the same layer, and we'll do something that's kind of like a nice middle ground, but still achieves the effect that we want. And I think that a 4 is gonna work really well there. So we'll just hit OK on that. And as you can see, it's applied to all of our text right here, and it's all still legible. However, this text is still pretty dark. So what I want to do is double click on the text layer, and we'll open this up in Illustrator. As you can see, when we open this up, it doesn't have any of the blur effects applied to it because that's all being handled as a smart object in Photoshop. But what I want to do is double click on this, and we'll bring this up to, well, let's just bring it up to 20% and hit save. And now we'll go back to Photoshop, and now you can see all of these effects being applied here. You can see our grain effect, you can see our paper effect right here is applying directly to this text itself. All right, so now if you're at this point and you say to yourself, it's a little bit too strong on the sepia tone, it's a little bit too yellow or orange, how can we fix this? You know, now that we've done all of these things to it. Well, that's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is add an adjustment layer of hue and saturation above this, and make sure that it's the topmost layer. That way it affects everything below it. And just go over here to hue, and you can just kind of make these adjustments here. You can change it really to whatever color you want, but what we want to do is decrease the saturation. So we'll bring it down to maybe -50. That's looking a lot better than this, at least in my opinion. So there's one last thing that I want to add to this poster because this is supposed to be the bad tour. There's something missing from right here, and that's the bad tour logo. So this is where the bad tour logo is. I'm gonna go ahead and select this image, and we'll bring this down to about 50% opacity. I'm gonna grab my pencil tool, and I'm in Illustrator now, just so you know. I'm gonna grab my pencil tool, and I'm gonna move this all the way down to accurate. And just in case you didn't see how I did that, all I did was double click on the pencil tool. So we're gonna bring this all the way down to accurate, and we'll leave all of the settings just the way they are. And then what I'll do is just start tracing, and I'm gonna trace around this entire thing, and I'll speed up this portion of the video. All right, so I have all of that done, and what we're gonna do is select all of this. I'm gonna move this over here just so it's easier to work with. I'm gonna swap the fill and the stroke, and as you can see, all of these little counters on the inside here are filled in. So all we have to do is knock those out. So all we have to do is select all of this, go over here to our Pathfinder and click on Divide. And then we'll use our direct selection tool by hitting A on our keyboard and select all of the counters and then just delete those. And you'll learn more about doing stuff like this by learning the Pathfinder. So definitely check that video out right there. All right, so what we want to do is we want to take care of any colors right here in Illustrator. It's just a little bit easier to manage when they already come in the way that you want them. So we're going to change it to red, hit copy, and paste this into Photoshop. I'm actually going to go above the curves right here so that it's not affected by it. And we'll just kind of enlarge this right here. We may end up changing the colors here, but you want to make sure that your overlaps are good right here. We can just kind of rotate it if we want to. Kind of makes it look like it's spray painted onto the poster itself. And I think what we'll do is we'll move it above the hue and saturation layer. That way it gives it more of a vibrant color. And let's do this. Let's move the grain layer above it. So that way the effects are applying to this layer as well. And I think I might bring it in just so that we don't have any kind of weird openings right there. And now what we'll do is go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And we'll blur this to about 3 pixels. You still want it to be legible. All right, so fun story. Photoshop just crashed on me while I was trying to make one more adjustment, and thankfully it saved everything in recovery. So I'm gonna go ahead and just move this back into Photoshop, and we'll have it just like we did before, but we'll have to do a couple of adjustments here to get it exactly where we had it. I'm actually pretty happy with that red, so we'll just leave it like that, and we'll bring the grain to the top again so that it's affecting that. And let's reapply our Gaussian blur at 3 pixels. Looks good. Before I do anything else, I'm gonna save it. And there's one last thing you can do. It's totally optional, but this is just gonna make it look like the text is a little bit more part of the paper rather than just sitting on top. Where it is right now, it does look totally fine, but we can make it look just a little bit more authentic. So let me just move this over here. I'll show you exactly what we're gonna do. So go down here to your underlying layer and hold down either Option if you're on Mac or Alt on Windows. And just click on this little left caret right here. Just bring it over very slowly. And you can see what's going on here. More of that background is gonna be showing through the text. So I'm thinking probably like 234 looks good. We'll just hit OK. And it is applying to everything right here. And keep in mind that the larger the text area, and because we have that grain overlay with the vignette, it's affecting this area of the type more than this area of the type because this is closer to the outer edges. So just keep that in mind, although it does make it look a little bit more authentic because it's uneven now. And with posters aging the way that they do, it would actually look a little bit more inconsistent. And then we can do the same thing to the image layer. So double click on this. Hold down Option, bring over your caret, and we probably don't want to do this too much, maybe just to the point where you start seeing some change, which is like 236. That looks good right there. We'll just kind of leave it like that. All right, so here it is, the Michael Jackson Bad Tour 1988 for my birthday, Nashville Starwood Amphitheater. And obviously this is a dream concert. It's one that I never actually got to go to. Would have been really cool to see Michael Jackson live during the Bad Tour. That would have been so awesome. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope I taught you something in Photoshop or Illustrator today. If you don't mind, please consider subscribing to support the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.